Okay, this is going to be a quick one, I think. Just At this point, I'm just making videos to detail the decline of Canada that has been happening very slowly, and now it is accelerating. Um, so the theme of this video is two fallacies that I see going on that are going to end poorly. But first, the news. So the news is that Canada suddenly lost 3,000 jobs or 3,300 jobs. Now, I'm not sure if these are part time, full time, whatever. Most likely full time. Let's It makes up a bulk of it. And the other thing to take into consideration around that is that the jobs that have been created over the last, let's say, a few years, a lot of them were in the public sector and a lot of them were part-time, right? So I don't know. You'd have to go month to month and add it all up to see how many full-time jobs did we actually create in the private sector, because at this point in time, that's what matters. That's what's going to save our economy. The public sector is not capable of saving the economy. But yeah, so why are we losing jobs when in the United States they had 300,000 new jobs? Now I don't know what percentage is part and full time, but why it really goes back to my previous videos is that we do it's part of it is due to our lack of productivity. So um, and when I say lack of productivity, it doesn't mean that Canadians don't work hard. What it means is Canadians have to work harder in order to generate the same amount of contribution to like the GDP than our counterparts in other countries. That's what it means. It actually means we're working harder for less for everyone. So when that happens, obviously it's not sustainable. Your competitiveness goes down the drain, right? Because it's suddenly more expensive to make something here than elsewhere due to that. So that's what lack of productivity means. And yeah, sometimes I assume people know these different terms from an economic standpoint, but I'm sure people get upset when they hear that Canadians aren't productive. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that we don't invest in technology in Canada. We only invest in real estate. And as a result, people are working harder to produce less in comparison to other countries in the G7 and stuff like that. So anyway, that was one bit of news. Yeah, the job losses. So part of it has to do with productivity, but another one has to do with what I've been saying for quite a while, and that is that with rents going up, like for example, there's a nice working class house down the street here. I saw that the family had moved out of it, and I went on rentals.ca to see what this working class house was renting for, and it is listed for $6,000 a month. Well, that is 100% of the take-home income of a middle-class person family in Toronto. So renters are expecting 100% of an averaged salaried couple, right? For their rent, which is completely unsustainable. But if people have no choice right now, they may find themselves getting into a situation where they take that on, hoping that better times are ahead. But what ends up happening is that people have less and less and less spending money, and then they are buying less, and so the end result is going to be layoffs, right? Because companies are going to be making less money unless they are unless the company is based on natural resources that we're exporting and stuff like that, right? So those two things combined, our lack of productivity and our high cost of living, and also mortgages are renewing now from a time when the original rates were low but the prices were high, and so those families are now going broke as well, and they can't afford anything, and so money is drying up. Money is suddenly drying up. In particular, I would assume in BC and Ontario. Um, Now, another thing that was in the news just recently was that the Liberal government has decided to increase amortizations on mortgages for new home buyers of new properties to 30 years. And this is, I guess, they'll probably spin this as this is helping to have more homes built, right? Because it makes it more affordable. But my point is this: the Liberals have been trying to keep this house of cards moving across horizontally now for several years. They can't afford for it to start to fall apart. So essentially, all they're doing by doing this is supporting high prices. And as long as you can keep bringing more people in to buy at the prices that they are now, it'll continue to support that, and the prices, everything will just move sideways. But you're actually losing money, because the fact is that, um, with inflation being what it is, you have this asset that is worth the same now as it was 5 years ago, right? So it's not, you're not actually gaining anything other than the fact that you're not paying rent. You're paying down, well, if you bought 5 years ago, you're still mostly paying interest. Let's be honest, right? But anyway, that's another piece of news. Another piece of news was that here in Ontario, we've been told that there is going to be a huge budget deficit this year, provincially, for the provincial government, due to a decrease in revenues. And so when I hear that, that tells me that one of two, or two of two things is happening. Either people are spending less money, and this would have to do with the fact that rents are going up and people are renewing their mortgages, and families are completely broke now. As a result, like many families, like a larger percentage every day, and so they're spending less money, right? And the other thing that could be happening is that people are getting laid off, right? People are losing their jobs, and perhaps both things are happening. Well, we know now that Canada lost 3,000 jobs. In, I forget which month it was, but it was a surprise, apparently, right? I don't know how it's a surprise, because anyone that looks at things macroeconomically would have to say, as rents go up and productivity continues to decline, there are going to be massive amounts of job losses. It just seems obvious. So, yeah, I said there were two fallacies. There's actually three fallacies. So, with all this information, let's look at the three fallacies. So, the first fallacy is that the Ontario government seems to think that we are going to have this huge deficit this year, but things will recover next year with revenues. I do not see, with this huge house of cards that we have here, how either with people either spending less because they're going broke, well, the rents aren't going down in the next year, right? Or because they renewed their mortgage, well, the rates aren't going to affect them until they renew next time. So I don't see, from that perspective, how in a year anything's going to change. As a matter of fact, it's only going to get worse. Even if we have two interest rate cuts, things are going to be worse than they were when the people bought these houses 5 years ago, as they're renewing, right? It's going up. There's no doubt about it. Now, rents may go down as more and more people lose their jobs, right? That could definitely happen, but I don't see that happening by the end of this fiscal year enough such that it's actually going to bring up the revenue, right, for the Ontario government. And people getting laid off, and unless we're in a huge transitional period, I don't see that there's going to be these huge amounts of layoffs and then they're going to be hired again. Transitional periods happen when you invest in productivity, and then people have to be retrained and they change jobs. That doesn't seem to be happening in Canada right now. And the Ford government said it themselves that they don't believe that the private sector is contributing enough to productivity, while the government is spending all this money for infrastructure and stuff. But I'm calling BS on that. Because one of the reasons we know this, that productivity is low, is that, one problem we face is that the cost of your average person renting, right? So starting out is so high, right, that we have to pay like we're paying more and more to attract people to live in Toronto, for example, um, because they can't live here otherwise, right? And part of that has to do with the fact that this is the person that got rid of rent control. So anyone that lives in a new build, their rent can go up every year, whatever their landlord wants to do. The landlord can double it if he wants. So Doug Ford is not doing anything to help with productivity at all. As a matter of fact, he is helping to destroy the economy here. But and there so there's a fallacy anyway that they think things are going to get bad and then turn around quickly. I do not see that happening. If what they're saying is actually going to happen, it's going to take 3 to 5 years to hit rock bottom, right? I don't think we're going to hit rock bottom and then rebound in 1 year with our productivity being what it is. So there's that. That's one fallacy. Another fallacy is that people who own property this is everyone from those people that invest in these funds that have rental properties that they buy up and stuff. Those people down to like a person who owns like 5 condos and rents them all out. They live in a fallacy as well because they believe that feudalism has returned, right? They believe that if their mortgage goes up at time when they renew, it's your job as the renter to face that increase. It's not their fault that they are lousy investors, right? And invested in a property where the rent doesn't support the mortgage. It's your fault for being a renter and you have to pay for it. And that can definitely work out for a while. But they don't understand that we actually live in capitalism still. And from a macroeconomic standpoint, we can only continue doing this until it gets to the point where we've broken the economy. And it seems like we've hit that point now. It seems like we've pushed things so far that we've broken the economy, and now there's job losses. So where are you going to get all this money? And a lot of these places, I think that own tons of property think that what they can do is keep a certain percentage of it unoccupied in order to drive up rents everywhere else, and to make more money that way. It's like back when they would destroy crops in order to drive up the price, right? That's what they're trying to do with properties. I believe that is going on, right? And but that only works for so long, because once you've drained everything out of the economy for your greed, everything falls apart and you can't get blood from a stone. These people are going to be on EI. Where are they going to get the money? Right now, people are going into debt to pay their rent. That's essentially what's happening, right? That can't go on forever. So that's another fallacy that they think, like there's this weird thing. I've seen so many landlords, small-time landlords post a thing saying, my tenant doesn't get it, and they may have tenants that are not in a new build, so they don't have to pay any extra above the provincial limits, right? So, but they're like, my tenant doesn't get it, my mortgage has gone up because I've renewed, or I'm on a variable rate. And so they have to pay me more, and they don't get it. No, they don't have to pay you anything. You made a bad decision. That's your fault, and you're 100% on the hook for that. Your tenant certainly is not. And even in those places where you have a new build, eventually your luck is going to run dry because people do not have $5,000 a month to rent a condominium. Look around you at what the average family income is in Toronto. Cut that at least in half, and then that is the max that over the long term you should expect for the rent in your condo. And Airbnbs, as we see, we have job losses and declining revenues. Airbnbs are going to get hit as well, right? So there's a fallacy around all of that, as if the economics have changed. They haven't changed. Things will get back to normal eventually, and it's going to be very painful. And then, the other fallacy is that the federal government seems to think that they can put in policies that prevent prices from crashing, but also help to get more and more young people onto the property ladder. It's an absolute joke. It's an absolute failure of a theory. We cannot allow prices to stay where they are. It's going to continue to destroy the economy. They should have been doing things like putting capital gains taxes on properties a long time ago to prevent everything that has happened from happening, but they are so hooked on the fact that the Canadian economy was staying afloat because of high real estate prices that they wouldn't do anything to touch it, and now this is the situation that we're in. But if you look at, what's happening with Doug Ford in Ontario, we can see Conservatives are not going to fix any of these problems. They're just going to make them absolutely worse, right? As a matter of fact, the provinces are responsible for most of the huge failures across Canada when it comes to all of this. The provinces refuse to pay and tax properly for universities. Instead, they want to bring in as many foreign students as possible because we charge them far more for tuition, and that is what we use to keep these schools going. But now these have turned into cash for credit kind of colleges all over the place. We don't have any place for a lot of people to live. People are living in absolute squalor. We have people lining up for miles to get jobs in some areas. It's an absolute disgrace and a joke. And at the same time, the province, while they're doing this, or provinces, do not invest in healthcare the way they need to, and that is falling apart. And then in Ontario, they're really trying to say, private healthcare is going to solve all of this. So we pay all this extra money to bring in healthcare workers from private organizations. Meanwhile, we tried to prevent healthcare workers that were unionized from having proper bargaining agreements, and that went all the way to the Supreme Court, as I mentioned previously. So really, the provinces are to blame for so much of this. I like to go after the Liberals. I think the Liberals have been very stupid, and I think they've gotten very lazy, thinking that property can save the Canadian economy. It can't. It absolutely cannot. And we are now at the end game. And it is their fault, just like it was the Conservative government before them. Their fault for not allowing the last correction to fully work its way through the system, right? So all of these three fallacies are going to be challenged over the next year, and who knows what's going to happen. Now, I started off saying that we were done, and it looks like we could have, stagflation for 10 years. But now that I see that the job losses are coming, I guess you would say in many ways, the worst of my fears seems to be coming true, which is that we're actually going to have perhaps a huge correction. Because once people start losing their jobs, the bottom is going to fall out of the housing market pretty quick, I think. And a lot of people are going to be hurt. And what's going to end up happening is going to take 3 or 5 years of pain, and we're going to hit the bottom. And then we're going to have to think about rebuilding. So what I'm going to be thinking about between now and my next video, unless there's a whole bunch of other news to go on about, is what do we need to do to rebuild to prevent this from happening again? And I think the number one thing is that we must prevent property bubbles from ever happening again. It sounds too good to be true, because we went through this in the 80s and 90s. And here we are again, screwing up our entire economy for real estate. We never learn. Governments don't learn. And I doubt that they'll do anything to resolve this. But anyway, hold on tight. It seems like it's going to be a rough 3 to 5 years. I could be wrong. It's only the beginning of a correction if it is happening. And governments will often do anything they can to prevent that correction from happening on their watch, because they know they may not get elected again in the next 20 years if it happens under their watch. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, I will think between now and the next video, like there is supposed to be a political and economic angle to this channel. And what it is kind of like, from a left-wing perspective, we need to get more involved in the economics of the country, and not just talk about spending, right? And not just talk about identity politics. We have to look at economics, and we have to provide input and provide plans that help to make an economy that is both productive and fair, right? So that's really what we need to think about once before the rebuild starts. And we have to lobby the government to say, no, we're not accepting this again. We are not accepting that we're going to start another speculative bubble on property. It's totally unacceptable. It's destroyed. This province has been destroyed now for 5 years. And it's going to take another 5 years at least to get out of this. That means that people's lives have been destroyed, and plans that they had for their lives have been destroyed if they don't get out of Canada, right? So it's pretty serious. So anyway, thanks for watching. We'll see if I can come up with something for the next video as far as policies go. Thanks.